States' rights, the Swiss Army knife excuse of American history, always handy, but rarely used for what you'd expect. If states' rights were a car, its bumper sticker would read, "Honk if you love euphemisms." This phrase gets tossed around like barbecue at a Southern picnic whenever the Civil War comes up. Folks claim the Confederacy was merely defending local authority, as if South Carolina seceded because Washington, D.C. sent them too many parking tickets. Here's the myth. Many insist it was all about self-government. Slavery, they say, was just an unfortunate side dish at the secession buffet. But crack open any actual Confederate document, and you'll find subtler uses of liberty than a pirate lecturing about maritime law. Southern politicians waxed poetic about rights. But check their speeches. The right front and center was to own people, not to open a funky new DMV. For proof, just read their secession declarations. Slavery takes top billing, in font sizes usually reserved for sale signs. When northern states resisted the Fugitive Slave Act, those states' rights champions suddenly craved centralized power, like kids eyeing the cookie jar. They wanted federal muscle to retrieve their property. Apparently, states' rights meant doing whatever you want, as long as it's awful. And yet, decades later, we're still buying the states' rights disguise. Think Groucho Marx glasses on a pile of self-interest. The truth is, the Civil War wasn't a polite spat over driver's license rules. It was about who could own people. So next time someone waves the states' rights flag, remember, sometimes history's Swiss Army knife is just opening a can of worms. Understanding the true cause requires examining key figures like Abraham Lincoln and his intentions regarding slavery. T. Hugh. Picture Abe Lincoln as a bearded superhero, cape billowing, one hand clutching the Gettysburg Address, the other heroically freeing every enslaved person he passed, right there at his inauguration. No wonder folks imagine Lincoln woke up day one, brewed a giant mug of emancipation, and started kicking down slavery's doors like a historical Costco shopper on Black Friday. Myth. The legend tells us Abraham Lincoln, lifelong abolitionist, marched into the White House with a single mission: free the slaves. It's a marvelous origin story, perfect for comic books, if not quite for history books. Facts. But Honest Abe's real Instagram bio? Full-time president, part-time emancipator. Early Lincoln cared way more about holding the Union together than instant freedom for all. His first moves included gradual emancipation and even colonization plans. Yes, the idea of sending freed Black Americans off to live somewhere else. Turns out, Lincoln's beard grew faster than his commitment to immediate abolition. Punch. Lincoln wasn't born wearing an abolitionist cape. It took a few awkward fashion fittings. As the Civil War dragged on and pressure from abolitionists, his cabinet, and the public dialed up to 11, probably causing top hats nationwide to vanish from sheer stress, his views evolved. The Emancipation Proclamation wasn't a day-one drop. It was the product of fierce political math and battlefield realities. Bridge. So, while Lincoln's reputation as the great emancipator is legendary, it was brewed with equal parts principle and political pragmatism. He grew into his superhero suit, and by the time he buttoned it up, both the Union and the cause of freedom were forever changed. Turns out history's heroes learn on the job, cape, beard, and all. While Lincoln's motives are debated, the military strategies on both sides also shaped the conflict's course. The South's generals, military masterminds, or just guys with aggressively artistic facial hair? The legend machine wants you to believe every Confederate officer was a sunburned Napoleon, cooking up schemes so sly their mustaches twirled in anticipation. Hollywood and history books lavish praise on Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson, as if Lee's lightning and Stonewall's stand were secret moves in some Southern fight club. But let's dial down the drama. Spoiler alert, not every Southern general was a battlefield chess champ. Sure, the Confederacy had a few sharp tacticians, but tactical genius was distributed about as evenly as sweet tea at a New England brunch. For every Lee maneuvering with boldness and cheekbones sharper than bayonets, there was some general whose grand strategy was about as tangled as his family tree. Some decisions smelled less like strategy and more like, hold my mint julep while I wing this. Even Lee's famed audacity had an expiration date. His early gambits earned applause, but when the North combined grit, gunpowder, and railroads, Southern-style points didn't keep score. And we can't forget Pickett's charge, history's colossal oops, where Southern bravery marched headlong into a hailstorm of Union artillery, cloaked only in wishful thinking. If tactical brilliance automatically crowned victory, Confederate statues wouldn't be such hotly debated relics today. The truth? Often, the one thing some Southern commanders could command with absolute certainty was an impressive beard. In war, brilliance counts. But so do numbers, supplies, and maybe a touch less swagger. Now about those facial hair trophies. Despite tactical brilliance, the war's nature was far from straightforward or entirely honorable. Picture the Civil War as a polite fencing match, gentlemen in crisp uniforms shaking hands before parrying gracefully. Right? Sounds like Jane Austen with more mustaches and muskets. The myth persists. A war between gallant foes who treated every skirmish like a cotillion with cannon fire. Let's rein that horse-drawn fantasy straight into a mud pit. If clean and honorable means mud, dysentery, and stolen chickens, then sure, the Civil War was a smashing success. Over 600,000 people died in 4 years of carnage. Surgeons became fast friends with the saw. Anesthesia was scarce, and hygiene was more wishful thinking than reality. Calling Civil War medicine barbaric is practically a compliment. Nothing says dignity like losing a leg with a swig of whiskey and a prayer you don't die of gangrene. The battlefield quickly ditched any air of aristocratic ballet. Generals launched scorched earth campaigns that razed towns. Sorry, Atlanta, we still see the smoke. Civilians endured looting, burned crops, and food shortages that'd make your local grocery store panic at the first snowflake. And honorable prisoner exchanges? When those crumbled, POW camps like Andersonville and Elmira served up conditions so grim, etiquette headed for the hills while rats became unexpected protein supplements. Battlefields had about as much etiquette as a family reunion food fight. Disease, filth, starvation, and relentless trauma carved scars that ran deep. The only souvenirs many veterans took home were empty sleeves, haunted eyes, and nightmares making sleep as hazardous as combat. So next time someone waxes poetic about the Civil War's civilized chivalry, remember, it was less duel of gentlemen, more mud wrestling in hell. Pass the peppermint, and maybe some penicillin while you're at it. Moreover, the beliefs of Northerners were complex, and not all championed abolition. Picture the whole North as a sea of Harriet Beecher Stows. Quills blazing, hearts bleeding, all sipping abolitionist tea beneath portraits of Frederick Douglass. According to popular myth, every Northerner stood valiantly at freedom's gates, scheming emancipation with all the pomp of a 4th of July parade. If that were true, Uncle Tom's Cabin would have been a group project, doomed to derail the moment someone insisted on turning it into a musical. But the real story? Northern opinion on slavery was about as unified as Thanksgiving dinner with your most outspoken in-laws. Sure, some signed petitions and held rallies, but others treated abolitionists like pineapple pizza fans, visible, vocal, but hardly mainstream. Far from it, several northern states, despite slapping a no-slavery sticker on their records, kept laws toward Black Americans as welcoming as a snowstorm in April. Discrimination was baked in institutionally, not just socially. Then, there's the economic irony. The North's textile mills spun happily oblivious, or deliberately so, to the fact that their beloved Southern cotton came courtesy of enslaved labor. This wasn't abolitionist zeal, it was capitalist pragmatism. Plenty of Northerners opposed slavery's expansion, but mostly to keep the South from hogging all the congressional seats. Think less end cruel suffering, and more not in my backyard, thanks. The punchline? Many abolitionists found themselves dodging rotten eggs more than winning applause. You know a cause isn't sweeping the nation when its champions have to duck better than contestants on a reality show. So while abolitionist support eventually grew, the North was never a united front. It was a noisy, complicated, sometimes contradictory crowd fumbling through moral gray areas. Beyond the battlefield and political arena, the roles of women during the war challenge common perceptions. Picture World War II as a chaotic dinner party, exploding soufflés, questionable hors d'oeuvres, and a fierce squabble over the last potato. Yet somehow, some still insist women were just setting the table. According to popular lore, women spent the war delicately waving handkerchiefs on the sidelines, perhaps knitting the world's largest collection of woolen socks. In this version, ladies were passive spectators, calmly sipping tea while history passed them by. Let's toss that tired narrative into the compost heap. Waiting at home knitting socks often meant decoding secret enemy messages between tidy rows of purl and knit. Women became expert code breakers, resistance fighters, factory workers, and yes, actual spies. Rosie the Riveter? She wasn't just flexing for a poster, she was building planes, tanks, and all sorts of metal monstrosities. If women in World War II were mere bystanders, then my cat is a nuclear physicist. Spoiler, he's not, he just sits on the keyboard. Frontline action? Nurses and medics face danger head-on. US and British pilots ferried planes into combat. Soviet women were snipers and pilots, racking up impressive records in marksmanship and stubbornness alike. Meanwhile, in occupied countries, women led underground resistance networks and smuggled intelligence, shady, high-stakes work that makes binge-watching spy dramas look like a bake sale. Standing by in a munitions factory was more like lighting a fuse in a fireworks show. You were the spark, not the spectator. Far from filling in for men, these women rewrote the very fabric of the conflict. So next time someone claims women only set the WW2 table, remind them they cooked the entire meal and then rewired the kitchen. Similarly, the experiences of enslaved individuals reveal active struggles rather than passive waiting. Imagine if freedom were like Amazon Prime. One-day delivery guaranteed, rock-solid tracking updates, and maybe even a discount on next-day hope. But emancipation? Nope, sorry, no out-for-delivery alerts on that elusive package. Picture the myth. Enslaved people lounging around, hammocks optional, just waiting for Honest Abe's big push notification. Congrats? You've been freed! Click here to review your oppressors. Spoiler alert. History wasn't playing on shuffle. The real story? Self-liberation was a daily high-wire act. Think daring escapes, whispered plans, and a constant soundtrack of nail-biting risks. Waiting for freedom to arrive by carrier pigeon? Not exactly the go-to strategy. Enslaved people crafted coded messages, mapped routes that would give a hedge maze a headache, and set blazing fires of resistance beneath the very system that tried to chain them. Just thinking about escape? That could mean being ripped from family or facing punishment so cruel they'd make Twitter trolls shudder. Standby wasn't in the vocab, unless you meant stand by that back door at midnight, ready to sprint. And this was no solo gig. Abolitionists and free black communities channeled Harriet Tubman's spirit, offering hideouts, hot meals, and first-class, risky tickets on the Underground Railroad. The original disruptors, before disruptor was trendy. Here's the kicker. The myth that everyone just sat tight until the Freedom Memo landed? Besides being wildly inaccurate, it's downright disrespectful. It erases the grit, brains, and sheer will of those who masterminded their own jailbreak from one of history's harshest prisons. Freedom wasn't delivered overnight. It was chased, fought for, and grabbed with trembling hands and fierce hope. One-day shipping? They built the delivery route themselves, carrier pigeons stubbornly included. Finally, the aftermath of the war involved contested acceptance and ongoing conflicts over its meaning. If you think everyone calmly accepted the Civil War's outcome, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn and a handful of Confederate dollars to sell you. Contrary to legend, there was no national group hug or spontaneous kumbaya session. The country didn't just shrug, drop their muskets, and head home for lemonade and reconciliation. Turns out peace treaties don't come with acceptance speeches or emoji reactions. The myth of collective shrugging looks great in high school textbooks, but real life was a bit more, shall we say, theatrical. Southern bitterness wasn't tucked neatly under the rug. It was thrown out the window like yesterday's draft dodger. In the defeated Confederacy, resentment spread like kudzu on a hot summer day. Many couldn't stomach seeing federal uniforms in their towns, and Reconstruction didn't heal wounds so much as pour salt in them. Secret societies like the Ku Klux Klan? No bake sales there. They were busy sabotaging civil rights. Meanwhile, Southern politicians stirred nostalgia like a witch's brew, kickstarting a recycling program full of hoop skirts, lost glories, and what would be dubbed the lost cause. Let's not put the North up on a pedestal either. Union veterans didn't spontaneously break into victory parades or form folk bands. Some called for harsher punishments for Confederates. Others thought the federal government was going soft. Congress? More like the sequel no one asked for, round 2 of the war by political means. In short, if only everyone moved on as fast as your ex after a breakup. Instead, the war's wounds lingered everywhere. In charred city ruins, at Sunday dinner tables split down the middle, and in a nation that couldn't stop bickering about Reconstruction, citizenship, or who actually won the peace. The war was over on paper, but the scars? Sticking around like a stubborn mule, kicking up dust whenever anyone tried to ignore them.